if you're going to keep calves for any period of time after weaning, you're going to have to put some feed in them in some way, shape, or form. And so what I'm going to do today is try to kind of take you all through a couple of real applied case studies of how you can do that in a way that best gives you the opportunity to make some additional dollars off of these calves. The thing I always like to do when I start these, though, is to kind of touch on the terminology, because we often kind of get it a little bit jumbled in the industry. So one term that you'll hear pretty frequently is preconditioning. That's weaning your calf crop and retaining them on the ranch of origin or farm of origin for a period of time after weaning. Now, preconditioning, a lot of people think about that in terms of, oh, well, my calves will automatically bring more dollars at the sale barn, or they'll garner a dollars per hundredweight premium. And so, you know, that's one option. The other two options are where maybe you're buying somebody else's calves, growing calves, and you're running them on your farm. A stocker operation would be one that is based around forages and grazing. A backgrounding operation is typically more like a dry lot. And in those systems, what you're hoping to do is basically buy undervalued animals and upgrade them, whether that's through nutrition, management, or, you know, simply you find a soft spot in the market that you're able to capitalize on getting these cattle bought. Backgrounding and stocker systems, you're making your money on the buy a lot of times and hoping to avoid, any major health challenges that might eat into your bottom line. Preconditioning, you're basically trying to add more value to your calves. And given that we have, 1.8 million calves in the state of Missouri, and I believe like 1.4 million of them leave this state to be fed elsewhere, I really believe that, in these preconditioning systems is where Missouri beef cattle producers have an opportunity to add some value to their farms by retaining these calves and putting some additional weight on them. Okay, I already kind of jumped through this slide here, this goal slide, so I'm gonna go ahead and skip it for time. Preconditioning programs, if you're chasing the premium, if you're marketing your cattle under a preconditioned program banner, you're going to be following these guidelines on the slide here. They're going to be weaned 30 to 60 days. They're going to have a prescribed vaccination program for you to follow. Most of the programs will make some comment about a nutritional education, i.e. the calves are transitioned from milk and forage to, eating feed in a dry lot out of a bunk, being accustomed to a dry lot type setting. And then castrate, dehorn, deworm. And the reason that preconditioning programs were originally developed in Iowa State back in the 1960s was a goal of reducing feedlot morbidity and mortality. Now, what we see, at least in terms of feedlot morbidity, about 16% of calves that enter a feedlot will be diagnosed with respiratory disease at some point during the feeding period. And, despite many advancements in vaccine technology and antimicrobial technology, that number has maintained relatively constant over the years. And part of the reason for that is that if you look at the National Animal Health Monitoring Service data, 57% of calves are weaned essentially on the trailer on the way to the sale barn. So they are marketed right at weaning. And I think that's where we have a real opportunity. But the problem that we've had is that there have been times where preconditioned calf premiums at auction are non-existent, and so there's a perception among producers that the incentive to precondition these cattle is not there. In fact, I wrote an article for Progressive Cattlemen that came out in September about preconditioning and why I believe it's such an important component of the 21st century cow-calf operation. And I got a very nice email from a gentleman in Texas who was very upset. I guess I should say a relatively nice email. He was very upset because he had just taken 300 head of calves to sale barn. They'd been preconditioned, 2 rounds of shots, 60 days weaned. Everything was done right on his end, and they actually brought $3 a hundredweight less than a comparable set of non-preconditioned calves. And I unfortunately, I think he missed the point of the article, and the point of the story that I'm telling here is that we can't necessarily bank on that premium to make a preconditioning program that might cost $60 or $80 a head pay. We have to put these cattle in a position where they're going to gain some weight, and our value that we get from these calves are actually because instead of selling a 550-pound steer, we're selling a 700-pound steer, something along those lines. So, and that Mark Hilton at Purdue, and he was a former extension veterinarian. He now works in the industry for Elanco. He did a study along a few years ago, and they summarized the results of 11 years of preconditioning on a single farm in Indiana. They made, over the 11 years, they were profitable every year, this farm was, in their preconditioning enterprise. They made on average of $68.95 a head. What they saw, though, was that preconditioning premium actually went from $3 a hundredweight less to over $11 a hundredweight more. And so that premium was variable over those years. And as they did their economic analysis, they found that 63% of the profit in these calves was actually due to selling a heavier calf at auction at some point in the future. So again, to back up my statement, we need to think about how we're going to put these cattle on a feeding program where we're actually going to get some weight gain on them in relatively short order. And this statement that Dr. Hilton made in the extension publication that goes along with that paper, I think really drives it home for me. You get paid for gain. Calves gaining 1.5 pounds per day use most of the nutrients consumed for maintenance. Develop a ration where 2.5 pound average daily gain is possible. And I really take that message to heart when I'm working with producers across this state, and when I'm interacting with producers in other states as well who might reach out. I really try to push this message about getting these cattle to a point where they're gaining. Just to kind of start this conversation off, I just want to put this in context. So this is our diet formulation slide. And now what we're assuming is that these cattle are eating to appetite, that they have unrestricted access to feed. And I've used a 550-pound steer calf for this example. What I've got are 4 diets. Now, I didn't tell you what the formulation is. It just basically wanted to show that as we change the energy content of these diets, how it impacts animal performance. Now, any of y'all that have heard me talk at extension meetings, you hear me talk about cows and TDN requirements because I believe that energy is our most limiting nutrient in Missouri beef cattle production systems, in cow-calf systems, particularly when we get into feeding hay in the wintertime. And so you're hearing me talk about TDN values from 55 to 65 that correspond with a cow's nutrient requirements. The point of this slide here is to get you to understand that when we think about, TDN for cows, we're trying to meet maintenance. When we think about TDN or energy for calves, we're trying to provide nutrients in excess of maintenance so that we facilitate their ability for these cattle to grow. And so what I'm trying to get at is that, cows, we're just trying to meet maintenance. The TDN requirements are relatively lower, but with calves, we need to sort of push these cattle. We need to provide them more calories so that they'll be productive. Now, a diet that has a TDN of 65 or an NEG of 0.42, which is net energy for gain, that's another way of expressing energy. And one, quite frankly, that I like better in this growing calf model, because TDN works well in all forage diets, but when we get to mixing forages and grains to balance a ration, we're probably, and we're using substantial amounts of grain, we're more accurate if we use NEG. That 65 TDN diet corresponds with an expected average daily gain of 1.8 pounds. A 70 TDN diet corresponds with an average daily gain of 2.2, 75.26, and 80.30. Understand that these expected average daily gains are a function of not just the diet that you put in front of them, the environment, the management, and the size as well. And so these are sort of what I would say, feeding management under ideal conditions, or sort of a best case scenario. Now, to sort of shift gears a little bit, as I talk to a lot of folks in Missouri about, growing calves, and we think about these programs, a lot of folks will tell me that they want to feed hay and then put out a small amount of supplement in addition to the hay to get these cattle to grow. And what I'm trying to get everybody to think about is when we're putting these diets together, we're really balancing a ration. If we're giving them free choice hay and supplement, we're balancing that ration for these calves. And when we do this, balance this ration balancing, I always encourage people to make sure that their diet has a minimum of 12.5% crude protein, is a 0.50 megacal NEG diet, and that you're going to allow them the ability to eat 2.5% of their body weight per day, because that's going to give them the opportunity to gain near 2.5 pounds a day. Okay. So, you know, this is the scenario that plays out. Free choice hay and a little bit of supplement. This is not my favorite way of backgrounding or preconditioning calves. I'll just be really forthright about it, because hay quality is going to drive performance in this case. Under normal management circumstances, most folks are going to be putting out fescue hay, and it's probably going to be the same hay that they feed to their cows in the winters. And, you know, while it might make good cow hay, it's going to leave a gap in terms of nutrients, in particular energy, that we're going to have to backfill with our supplement. And, you know, if we use poor quality hay to calves, we're diluting the nutrients out of the supplement. And quite frankly, what that does, how that hits us in the pocketbook, is it takes more pounds of feed to get a pound of gain out of our cattle. Our cattle are capable of converting less than 5 pounds of feed into a pound of gain if we let them. If we set them up in a position with poor quality hay and a little bit of supplement, that feed conversion ratio might be 10, 11, 12. I've seen examples of that. And so I really implore y'all to feed good hay to growing cattle, and to think about if I have variability in my hay quality, feed the poorest stuff to the cows when their nutrient requirements are low, and save the best stuff for any calves that I might be trying to put gain on. You know, along with that, you know, make sure all these calves have the opportunity to eat supplement at the same time. You know, if you're feeding a few pounds of supplement, it's probably going to be cleaned up in 20 minutes or less. And so, you know, we need to have enough space where every calf can get up to the bunk. And for, you know, a 500 to 700 pound animal, 18 inches of linear bunk space is plenty. And it helps if you can push the cattle up to the bunk for the first few days. If you can put some hay in the bunk to help them acclimate to learning how to eat out of a bunk, you know, anything along those lines will help ease that transition. So let's look at why I'm a little concerned about this scenario. Now, Gene Schmitz does a really nice job of cataloging all the hay tests that run through his extension office each year. And then he's nice enough to share with me an Excel spreadsheet that has all of these analytical values. And this is from Gene's last year fescue hay analysis. I pulled, you know, 5 out of 15 fescue hay samples, and I tried to pull the 5 that were neither the highest nor the lowest. They were kind of in the middle. Now, I've got 3 values here across the top: acid detergent fiber, which is a measurement of cellulose and lignin, TDN, and then the NEG. Now, the reason that I added acid detergent fiber to this is that's the test that the analytical lab runs, that they then use the value from to plug into an equation that will predict TDN and NEG. Okay, so the lower the quality of the hay, the higher the ADF is going to be. And you'll notice in this case, our TDN values were, you know, from 48 to 52. These were the fescue analyses that were sort of in the middle. If you put that up against the 0.5 NEG that I said was kind of our recommended threshold for diet formulation, we're a long ways off from that. And so, you know, in reality, this is close to meeting mid-gestation non-lactating cow requirements, who a TDN requirement of 55. But if we're trying to get a calf to gain 2 pounds a day and we're shooting for a diet that's at least 65 TDN, we've got a ways to go still. Now, in terms of supplement options, that's a little bit difficult for me to make broad sweeping statements because everybody's operation is a little different. I really like a supplement that is simple, a supplement that is cost effective, and I don't ever get too enamored with using the same supplement over and over like a lot of folks do, where, oh, that supplement worked really good last year, I'm going to use it again this year. I really try to factor price into the equation. From a pure nutritive value perspective, something like a cracked corn distiller's grains mix 50-50 is going to be nearly 20% protein and 0.7 NEG. Now that's well above our nutrient targets, but it really allows us to upgrade hay. And I point out this particular mix because that's probably going to be about as energy dense of a supplement as we might get. One big downside to it, though, is, you know, dried distiller's grains is in a meal form. that could be difficult on bins to handle without it bridging, might be a pain to feed, you know, so sometimes we'll see avoiding meal form feeds like dried distillers grains for that exact reason. Now there's other feeds that are on the list right here, and I've got the TDN value, the NEG, and also the crude protein, because I want to point a few things out here. Corn is going to be our highest energy feed stuff, but corn is well deficient in crude protein. Now that doesn't make corn a bad feed in and of itself, and certainly we have a lot of folks out there who believe that, you know, starch is bad for calves, for cattle in general, and it's really not. And corn actually fits really well with, you know, fall regrowth, stockpile, tall fescue. We don't have to overthink our supplementation program sometimes. You know, fall regrowth tall fescue will be 14 to 16% crude protein and, you know, above 60% TDN. You could add, if your calves are out grazing, you could give them 3, 4, 5 pounds of corn a day, and that would be all the supplement that they would need, other than, you know, obviously free choice salt and mineral. So corn's a real nice energy supplement in that case. Distillers grains is kind of a unicorn in that it has both significant quantities of protein and energy, and could be used as a sole supplement. But again, we go back to that difficulty in handling a meal form. Now, companies are starting to develop range cubes that are based on distillers grains, but the problem with them is that they're priced more into protein supplement for cow market. They're $300+ a ton. They don't make quite as much sense in the growing calf market, where we might need to feed a greater quantity of them, where the distillers grains might be $180 to $220 a ton by themselves in meal form. Soy hulls are another nice one. They're kind of corn light in my opinion because they don't have any starch. You know, the crude protein is marginal in them, but because they have no starch, they're high fiber as well. They're not as high in energy. I really like soy hulls as a cow supplement personally. If I know that I'm in a situation where energy is limiting, I typically will say that soy hulls are more of a cow feed than they are a calf feed, just because of the lack of energy density. Gluten is kind of an intermediate, you know, TDN crude protein, and Gene is going to cover that one more, so I'm going to just go down that one. Wheat middlings, I think there's a lot of opportunity with wheat middlings. Their availability is very seasonal. However, you know, the nice thing about them, they're a little higher energy, but they've also got significant crude protein. They could make a nice supplement by themselves. And then hominy is another option, kind of a corn alternative. You can get it bought cheap at times. It's another kind of seasonal type feed. And most of the feed companies, when they sell you a commodity mix, it's going to be some combination of these feeds, and the combination is going to have a spec to hit that might be 14-15% crude protein. The combination will be fed to limit the amount of starch, but also to take advantage of any seasonal price opportunities in the market. So, you know, when we get into commodity blends, I haven't really talked about branded products or complete feeds. You know, the commodity blends versus the complete feeds, the cost and the overhead are going to be the two largest differences. You know, if you're trying to mix your own commodity feeds yourself, you might need equipment to handle or store multiple commodity feeds. Alternatively, if you could buy, you know, wheat middlings in the late spring when price is very attractive and store large quantities of them, and then just use that as a you know, feed supplement over the rest of the year, you may not need to do it. The complete feed, oftentimes what they have is they're formulated with a mineral package with they provide support from the company who makes them, so they're convenience, and they're also sort of they bring support with them, so those are two benefits to them. The one thing that I'm not a big fan of, especially in a backgrounding situation, is a complete feed and a self feeder. Now, you're getting a lot of convenience there because they might come out and fill the feeder up for you. And so all you have to do is manage the self feeder, keep the pan clean from fines and things like that. But, you know, you're really paying a lot for convenience in that case. And, you know, feed efficiency becomes a big deal. Because and in my opinion, and you know, based on what I see in the literature, the more control that we have over intake, the more efficient our animals will be. And I'll give you an example. So if I'm using a complete feed and a self feeder, and let's say that feed costs $400 a ton, which is high, that's 20 cents a pound. If you get 5 pounds of, if it takes 5 pounds of this feed to get a pound of calf gain, and it's 20 cents a pound of feed, that is $1 per pound of gain. And so the hope is then in that case, for profitability's sake, that the value of gain, the value of the additional weight you'll put on these calves will be worth more than that dollar cost per pound of gain. A really well managed system, background system, your cost of gain, your feed cost of gain should be in the 40-cent range. And even then, if your value of gain, that value of that weight that you put on those animals is 75 cents, it's still a profitable enterprise, because if you spend 40 to make 75, you know, that's nearly 100% return on your investment. A little bit more on the management. I don't think we feed calves enough supplement when we're doing these types of backgrounding situations, particularly the free choice hay plus supplement. If you're not feeding these calves 1% of their body weight per day in supplement, we're probably not going to put a diet in front of them that has enough nutrients to support, you know, a 2 pound a day average daily gain. You know, I really encourage you to get them eating 1% of their body weight in supplement as quick as possible. And the reason that I encourage a minimum of 1% of body weight is, let me put it in the context of what their overall diet is. A calf that's 500 pounds, let's say 400 to 700 pounds, is probably going to eat somewhere in the neighborhood of 3% of their body weight in a free choice scenario. If 1% of their body weight is fed in supplement, that's a third of their overall dry matter, or their overall feed intake. And DMI that's on the slide there stands for dry matter intake. Mixing a ration that has, you know, a third supplement or concentrate or starch or anything along those lines, that's a very safe level. We bring cattle into the feed yard all the time, and we, with unknown origin, and we immediately will put a diet in front of them that will have 50% corn in it. And we know that the cattle are going to do very well on it, that there's no big issue in terms of transitions. You know, I tell people to start with, you know, start at 1% of body weight on day one, and every day that they clean that supplement up, increase their feed by a pound per head per day, you know, with a goal of, if you start them at 5 and your free choice hay and supplement, to get them to eat at least a pound or 1.5% of their body weight, which would be, you know, if they're 500 pounds when you start, 700 pounds when you sell them, 1.5% of the average would be of 600 pounds is about 9 pounds of feed. And so, you know, if you get them to eat, you know, 9 to 10 pounds of feed at a minimum of supplement, you know, we should be putting them in a position to gain 2.25, maybe even 2.5 pounds a day if everything goes well. This situation, this opportunity right here to put weight on these growing calves and to add value to your operation through this system is there, and it is ripe for the taking. We have tremendous advantages in Missouri in terms of commodity availability relative to a lot of other states. We also have a second competitive advantage that's almost unfair, and that's the fall regrowth that we have in tall fescue forage systems, and the quality of that fall regrowth, and even the quality into the winter if we carry it over a stockpile. So we have high quality forage, we have cost competitive commodities. We just really need to encourage producers across the state to look at this, to take a little closer look, and to try maybe to keep your calves after weaning, and think about marketing a 700-pound preconditioned calf, you know, 4 months after weaning or 3 months after weaning, a little bit longer, rather than, you know, basically marketing on the truck on the way to the sale barn.